tonight on our special Cover One Buffalo Disguise coverage combo platter, we are going to be walking through our choices at each of the positions you've been looking for the Buffalo Bills to draft tomorrow night. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia Worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. We are joined by your favorite wizard, witch, muggle, favorite character from Disguise Coverage, Anthony Prohaska. Gentlemen, how we doing? Aaron, I like your sweatshirt.
Thanks. I got this from I was on a date this week with a really handsome guy getting some wings, and he cares about me. He got me gifts. So
well, and because I was so excited about you and Till and Kris starting up Cover One Golf, and also the sweatshirt made me laugh. But
it's comfy too. It actually fits perfect. The size was right, and it's a chilly evening here in Western New York, so it's nice to have a little bit of a hoodie here going on. But I got a question for Anthony. Do we have equal parts blueberries in all of our muffins here, even though it's not on Disguise Coverage?
It's a wait and see. You can't just overestimate it to start out. You kind of just got to let things run its course, and then we'll judge it at the end. But I appreciate the acknowledgement for the blueberries.
Yeah.
So Anthony, welcome. Literally maybe my favorite jersey that you have in your collection that you're rocking tonight. The Oklahoma State Barry Sanders is absolutely fantastic. That is
thank you.
One of my favorites. And so Aaron and I obviously, credit you and Eric and the work that so many guys do, really digging into all the guys. And then Aaron and I basically, float along your guys' backs by just reading about the stuff that you guys do. How are you doing now the night before the draft? All the hay is in the barn. There's nothing else to study. There's nothing else to do. How is someone that has, legitimately grind through all this tape and reviewing all the prospects and getting ready to, build your own boards and things like that? Where is your mind at now? Literally we're 24 hours from when the Bills might be picking.
Yeah. One, I'm happy. Like, I love this time of year, and you and I were texting yesterday talking about how much this time of year means to me, but I'm excited for it to be over. Like, I'm excited to just sit back. I'm also looking forward to stop dealing with everyone's crap and their negativity and all that angst and anger that exists around.
He's not going to be available at that spot.
Right? How dare you pick somebody that I don't like? Give me your address so I can bomb your house. And I'm just tired of all of that, but it's an exciting time of year, and there's so many dudes I like in this draft, so I'm excited for the draft as a whole. And then just as like a Bills fan and person that covers the team, I echo a sentiment that Aaron, I think, tweeted out earlier today. I just think there's a lot of good possibilities. And I don't want to jinx it, but there's so many ways that round one in this draft can go right and not a lot of wrong. I'm excited to just watch it and just enjoy whatever happens. There's not really a lot of things that can happen in round one that I'm going to be super pissed at because of what Bean has done with this roster, how I think the board is going to fall, and then the value that exists at a multitude of positions. So I'm excited and looking forward to just kind of kicking my feet up and not stressing every single day, figuring out who I need to watch on film.
So Aaron, that kind of hints towards some posts you've been making lately and kind of talking that you've almost gotten yourself into a mindset where it's going to be hard for you to be upset. There's so many options that you're open to.
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. One, I think Brenden Bean, as always, is a guy that definitely has flaws. I'm not trying to sit here and just pump up Brenden Bean as the greatest GM ever, but he does a really good job of filling holes pre-draft and getting this roster in good shape. And that doesn't mean great. It's just that the floors of all these positions, even the positions of need, like wide receiver, the floor is pretty good. Even though you lost Stephon Diggs, you have some good, solid players at that position. So it puts you in a position that you can kind of let stuff fall for you. And if you get really aggressive and you want to go up and move up in this draft and move some assets, other positions are pretty well taken care of where you can take a leap like that. So he's put them in a really good position to move up, to sit and wait it out, to move back and draft. And also the other thing is not just what Brandon Beane's done. This is just a really good draft class, right? Like there's been a couple of years here where some of the COVID stuff got a little funky with draft classes and some of the position groups were a little weaker, but outside of edge, which is also a position of need for the Bills, outside of that position group, really all the position groups of need for the Bills, I see a lot of options, and not just in the first round, at least the way boards and mocks have fallen. We don't know how it's actually going to go this week, but the way that we're seeing things and the way and the projections that people are putting out there, there's a lot of great opportunities for the Bills to sit and wait and let things fall to them and still walk away with pieces that are going to contribute in 2024. So that's why I'm looking at it, and the way I'm looking at it is like it, to Anthony's point, there's not a lot of things that I'm going to walk away probably being mad about in this draft. I'm sure somebody could find a way on Twitter and let me know, and I'm sure that would make me irritated, but I think I know the strategy that Brandon Beane's going into it with. I think I know the spots that he's targeting for this team, and I feel pretty confident in all those areas in this draft class.
So a couple quick things before we dive in that is going to touch on our main topic today. We're going to go through maybe like the 5 or 6 main positions that everybody's been talking about. We're going to give you guys each of our calls of who we think makes the most sense. You know, obviously it's probably going to be a player that we also like, but it's going to be as predictive as we can make it, like a player we think you could see, whether it's a premium pick, the first or second round, or a day 3 pick that would make sense. But before we get into that, I want to, we had a couple questions in the chat. Bishop here saying, we appreciate you saying that, you know, you're going to be checking out our live draft coverage. We are going to have coverage all 3 nights as we go through the draft in multiple different ways. So we're going to have our live show running the entire time. That's going to have, you know, Dave Tilton and Steve Mathis and a lot of other guests across the board from Cover One jumping in. Anthony and I will be jumping on later each night, doing a immediate instant reaction to each of the picks that are actually made. We'll talk about it. But maybe there's a chance we don't do a show Thursday night. We'll see. Right. Bean could throw us a curveball, but we are planning to do one each night as we go through there. And we also have 3 guys on site in Detroit who are credentialed there at the draft. So Joe DeRosa is out there, Thomas DeLaus, John Helmkamp. They're going to be having little snippets. So make sure you check out their Twitter feeds. They're going to be posting videos, doing some preview stuff, going to the press conferences for some of the players that are drafted. So depending on who, there was a weirdly low number of players at the draft this year. I think like 13 players in attendance. So the odds are the player the Bills pick isn't going to be there, but you never know. Maybe if something spicy happens, we move up the board, you could see somebody there. But just all the different options that are available there. And one of the best ones, you know, if you are in a One Pass member, jump in to Cover One Pass. You can get in the Slack channel. Those nights are some of the best ones to be on. They're like the couple opening days of free agency and the nights of the draft is an awesome spot to be in, to be there with just all the other Bills fans going back and forth, having a good time. So we will have you covered across the board, ready to go.
That would probably be the only thing that actually would frustrate me about this draft is if I stayed up till 11 o'clock at night and then the Bills didn't pick.
And then we trade down to like 34, which is only like, you know, trading down 6 picks, but it means tomorrow night. And you don't get to do anything that first night.
Like a whole hour past my bedtime for nothing. Yeah. I'd be pretty mad about that. Yeah.
So one last question that I do think the one window where you talk about people being pissed off or, you know, whatever the frustration would be, I actually only think it would last a pretty short period of time. But the one scenario is, I think the 3 of us would be okay. But there's an awful lot of fans that if any position other than wide receiver gets picked on Thursday night, it is going to be the end of the world. And it won't matter if it's Dallas Turner falling to 28. It won't matter if, you know, there are so many scenarios where there could be an elite player that's available there that we just can't pass up. And it could be because there's a crazy run at wide receiver, or the opposite, that like only 4 went before our pick and we feel really comfortable later on. And I feel really confident that by the time the draft happens, especially after we get through the 2 4th rounders and 3 5th rounders, it's like 5 more top 150-ish picks. Once we get through those and the positions boxes that are going to be checked, I feel like then everybody's going to feel okay with it and get their minds around it, because I do think it's likely we'd trade up for a receiver in the second or get a really good one at 60. That's the only one I could think of where people would have a window. I think from the moment it happened Thursday night until we add a receiver to our roster on Friday night, I think that would be the window of frustration.
The local radio station would burn.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
God. The train would go off the tracks.
Yeah.
Can you imagine also too? I'm thinking of like, imagine a trade out of 28, and then the first pick in like the second round is also not a receiver. Just like that time, and in between that, like 3 more receivers go
at 34.
Yeah, right. It's a corner. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
A
like
trade down, and then we watch Baltimore and Kansas City draft receivers.
Right. They both have like Worthy and Mitchell or something. And it's just it would just be such chaos.
Hope Elon's got the servers ready.
Oh, we would.
It's intense. That I don't. And it's funny. I've been trying to think of it. Like, I don't know if the wide receiver in round 1 or give me death crowd is the majority, or if it's just an extremely vocal and angry group of people that are like the townsfolk at the beginning of Shrek with the torches and the pitchforks. Cause it's just,
I've seen a couple polls. I think the majority is valid, but I think the majority is like 60%, not how it feels like it's 90%.
Yeah.
I think it is a majority, but it's also a vocal majority.
Yeah.
So angry. I think we're seeing both.
To Ann's point though, I think if you polled all of us, we would prefer wide receiver in the first round in this class. But for us, it's not wide receiver or nothing. It's not like we only have to do that. And I think that's your point, is how much of the fan base is like dead set, no matter what, whether it's the 6th best wide receiver, or to your point, like there's some later on that we can go get. Those are the ones that I think that's probably the vocal minority saying like leaning into it too hard.
And I think that would be the case. Don't get me wrong. If we're there and I pick a silly situation, and it's even if Brian Thomas Jr. is probably the toughest one, where if it's Brian Thomas Jr., even if I like a Byron Murphy or a Dallas Turner more, I still might be like, don't play with fire here. Just take him. Just take him. It's okay that it's not the best possible asset utilization, but just take him. But let's say the top 4 are gone, and then it's, well, you have to take whoever they think is next, like Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Legette, but you could have had Latu or Byron Murphy or Jared Verse, and all of a sudden it's or Cooper DeJean, like whoever it might be. Like, well, come on, like there is a line, and you can push people. Okay, you're right. If it's not wide, you're right. That you like 5 or 6 of them that high. But what if 7 receivers go before we pick? Like at some point, there has to be a line where like it does make sense to pick something else. So
would Sean McDermott like wrestle Brenden Beane if DeJean's on the board in that scenario? And
only if it's Zach Frazier instead.
Good call. But that's also a good point too. Like if 7 receivers go, for example, is that 8th receiver really more valuable than? Because also put it in perspective. Say 7 receivers go. Probably at least in that situation, 6 or 7 offensive linemen are going. Then you're potentially looking at 4 QBs. Then you're probably looking at 2 or 3 corners, and you're looking at Brock Bowers. That in that situation, maybe Latu fell.
Somewhere really good fell.
Exactly. Like there, that means JPJ or Graham Barton or Latu is potentially there, or Johnny Newton is there. And then it's like, okay, would you rather have a premier blue chip potential type of dude at another position of need,
also a premium position? Like,
yes,
we're not talking about like some random, like you could get a stud pass rusher, like a legit premium position, and still be able to go up and get someone. So let's talk through first. This is exactly how we built tonight's show. We'll start with you, Anthony. We'll start with wide receiver. As we've gone through this, I think obviously there's, some Goldilocks here of like, hey, my choice obviously is Marvin Harrison Jr. That's who I think would be the best fit with the Bills. But as we go through and look at this, let's try to be predictive of who did you settle on as your premium pick guy that you think Bills fans should get their heads around, get ready for this name.
I go back and forth on this one all the time. And I do want to preface it by saying, I don't think I know there's some smoke happening now. I don't think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be there at 28. I felt that way.
A real quick aside, seen Daniel Jeremiah, who annually is one of the most plugged in guys. His mock had Brian Thomas Jr. to the Bills straight up at 28. I'd be lying if it didn't make me go, oh, Okay.
Yes. Oh my.
That's interesting.
Yes. And that's some of that smoke, right? Where I'm like, oh, interesting. Like, this isn't like, Timmy's mock 6.0 and he says Brian Thomas. I'm like, interesting. Because a lot of these guys, and that's also a good point. I feel, just in case people don't know, a lot of those like major industry mock draft guys or analysts, their mocks aren't necessarily what they would do. It's built based off of stuff they're hearing from scouts and teams. So they're trying to be accurate based off of what they're hearing. And so that's some of that smoke. Like seeing Brian Thomas there made me kind of take stock of that. But for the majority of the time this offseason, especially after the combine, dude, 6'3", 210, runs a 4.3 40 and has all this upside. I was just like, he's going to be the fourth receiver off the board. He's not going to be there. So I've kind of put that in my mind. Yeah. And then the other part that makes this a little complicated is, do the Bills view Dalton Kincaid as the one or a supporting piece to a true wide receiver one? And that kind of muddies all of it. I really came down to two dudes here, AD Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. I went with Xavier Worthy because I love him. And my biggest thing with him is I think his size and speed is what gets talked about the most. And rightfully so, but I think it's a disservice to his route running. He has legitimate sharpness to his route running. He's got sudden and crisp movements on his breaks, and that pairs well with his ridiculous speed. He attacks cushion. He gets on cornerbacks' toes. He's got really good deep ball tracking, which allows him to finish vertically in addition to being a field stretcher. He weighed in at 165 at the combine. I don't think he plays at 165. He weighed in at 169 in his pro day. I think regularly he plays in the low to mid 170s, which means he's probably not running a 4.21. He's probably running like a 4.26. Like, oh no, how slow. Oh, man. And again, he's not going to be, how terrible. Right. And he's not going to be, I don't think he's ever going to be a 50-50 ball winner or a big contested catch guy, but his speed and route running allow him to create separation vertically in the intermediate and underneath. And I know some people have knocked some of his drops recently. 2022, he had a 10.6 drop rate. He also played through a broken hand that year. This past year, he cut that drop rate down to 6.3%. And for reference, Marvin Harrison Jr. had an 8.2% drop rate. And I feel like people don't talk about that. They just blow it up with Worthy.
And so both receivers, quarterbacks are probably factors in some of that.
Quinn Ewers and
neither of them were playing with elite passers.
No, which is also in the conversation for AD Mitchell. Like, how come he only had a bunch of games with only 3 catches? Well, he's open a ton in those games, and Ewers just isn't getting the ball to him.
Some of the underthrown balls that Mitchell and Worthy tried to come back on were infuriating to watch.
Yeah, and so I just like his fit. And then putting him into this offense, you get a field stretcher. It opens up the underneath and the intermediate for Dalton Kincaid and allows him to work. It's not a true X, which is something I prioritize more, but I do think that potentially could be had with a double dip in round 2, maybe in round 3 if they get a pick there potentially, or even on day 4, even though it's a less ideal piece.
I was going to ask you that, like, wrapping my head around Worthy, I love it in a vacuum of adding it to the offense. And I've been really pumping the brakes on the whole idea of needing an X necessarily. I'm for positionless wide receiver rooms in the modern NFL, but and I also pump the brakes on size, but he doesn't give you something that I do think the Bills need a little bit. So for me, I'm for it. I agree with everything you're saying about Worthy, but it almost has to come with a double dip. And it doesn't mean it has to be a double dip in round 2, but it has to be, you have to walk out of this draft with another receiver that can give you a little bit more in terms of size, 50-50 ability, right?
Yes. You have to then pair it with like Brendan Rice, potentially like early on day 3. Yes. Polk, it gives you some like versatility in that regard, or it means, potentially you're looking at Dalton Kincaid maybe in more of like an X role, or Matt Collins is going to get some more usage there, and the Bills don't think they need it. And I'm probably talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth here because
they believe Shakir can do some of that more.
Yeah, Shakir can do. A lot of people think he's wide receiver 1. I'm seeing on my Twitter timeline now, but he's legitimately awesome. I am a big proponent of build your wide receiver room like a basketball lineup, like Daniel Jeremiah says. And I do think the Bills have a lot of point guards and 2 guards right now, and they need more of a power forward or small forward presence, which is really why I want that true X. But again, I think it could be had in a supplementary role or using Kincaid in some sort of fashion there. If you really had to twist my arm and I really focused on the X piece, I would go with AD Mitchell over Worthy, and I really think it would be a toss-up. But I'm a little higher on Mitchell than most.
So, Aaron, who was your premium receiver that you would put a chip on if you had to today?
Well, before that, I want to ask Ant, because I've been down on AD Mitchell But mostly it's the taking plays off. And then I try not to bite too much into I heard this scout said, but you also see the thing about him not managing his diabetes well, the things about immaturity, and it sort of all lines up with not feeling like a culture fit. And I know you're a big time film guy. Did you, in those plays that he's taken off and stuff, did you see that as a red flag problem, or you think that you can coach that out of him?
It's tough because you don't know the reasoning behind it. Like, and I've said this a bunch, like throughout this process of like, we don't know what he's being coached to do, what the expectation is, and what he's being allowed to do.
Is it he just knows the read is going the other way, so there's no sense running a route because I know that they're going that way?
And that happens a lot with, I'm getting like fired up about it. I didn't realize I was like clutch my hands ready to fight. Like you see that happen with Marvin Harrison Jr. It happens with Odunze. It happens with Worthy. It happens with Brian Thomas. It happens with Neighbors. You're seeing it a lot in college football now. When dudes know they're not part of the progression or their ball's probably going the other way, they're not going 110% on that other side that's not getting the ball. And then also what he said at the combine, I still think is interesting. Him saying like he doesn't run routes at 100% all the time. But he says he does that to try and create like deception and like indecision. Yes. And that can be problematic in the NFL because things are based more on timing and you need to be in this spot that I need you to be in. And also it's not just for you and me as the quarterback, it's to get other guys open in the concept. But it works for him in college because he'll run those plays at 30 or 40%. And it's almost like it lulls the corner into a false sense of security because then he does it again and he puts his foot in the ground and explodes out and creates 5 or 6 yards of instantaneous separation. So I wonder if it's more of it's maybe ill-advised in his process, but it comes from a good place. And that's the big question, right? I don't know if how all this looks comes from a bad place because he doesn't care and he takes plays off and he's like, whatever, like leave me alone. Or he thinks he's doing the right thing. He's being told it can be allowed to be that way. And all he just needs is a little nudge in the right direction and a coaching staff to be like, no, we don't do that here. It's the same thing with his blocking. He has blocks where it looks like he doesn't care if Xavier Worthy gets killed or like lives or dies or anything. And then he'll come right back on the next play, 4th and 1, and he's leading the rep out in the front, and he's blocking the corner 15 yards downfield to allow the running back to get a first down. We don't know the reason, but I think the flashes are enough to intrigue me. And I also think the interview process will weed it out. If we see him falling into the 40s, it's because people deduce that he's a problem.
I've used him as one of my self-fulfilling guys. I've used the example with Latu in his medicals. If he's on the board and he's picked, it's not that the Bills all of a sudden got comfortable being risky. It's that their background checks checked out and that they didn't have the concerns. The same thing. And if they pass on him, you can firmly believe that they didn't. It's not because he's a bad football player. It's because their background checks did not check out and that there's a reason. It'll be self-fulfilling if he's an option in there to be able to do it.
Absolutely.
So Greg, to answer your question, you know me, man, I tend to be conservative with all this stuff. I don't know if I'm just drunk off the draft or if I'm tired, but I'm going with Odunze, and it's because
I thought you were going to say Ladd. I'm so surprised.
Well, so what pulled me off of Ladd a little bit, I love Ladd, and I actually think he's a great fit for what the Bills want to do. I think that he would fit perfect with Josh Allen. I think that he can get open against zone coverage, which is huge for me in this modern NFL. I think he'd fit right in this wide receiver room. But Brenden Beane talked about injuries, and if it came down to multiple guys, if somebody had an injury history, they would defer to a different player, and that to me rang like Ladd a little bit in this first round anyway. But we talked about it a little bit with the national media guys, and I think some of the stuff they're fed is smoke. I don't know that everybody's giving them great information all the time, and they think that they are, but more and more over the past week, I've been seeing situations where Odunze is falling out of the top 10 and into like 12, stuff like that. And I honestly think I've been pumping the brakes on like, hey, we're not going to pull off some crazy trade into 7 or something like that. Like Brenden Beane, he wants to get crazy, but people will restrain him. But if Odunze falls outside of the top 10, I tweeted it out the other day. Like, I think you'd have to physically restrain Brenden Beane from jumping up and making a move. I think Josh Allen got his ear, and if Josh is picking some of these guys and ranking some of these guys, that's up there for him. And in terms of guys that you could get, once it falls out of the top 10, I think that Bean would feel good enough being aggressive again, because he's built this roster in a way that the holes aren't crazy and he can manipulate some of the pieces later and fill some of those holes and go get a guy that can actually be a number one. All these other guys, there's so many questions, there's flaws. Can they hit their ceilings and stuff like that? You put Odunze in this offense right now, you've got a number one going forward. Like there's no question about it. Kincaid doesn't need the pressure of having to be the number one. That can just be extra bonus. We have great players all around. It really solves all the problems. It's the wide receiver. WGR is happy. I'm happy. You're happy. And so I'm going all in.
We all win.
Exactly.
I love it. And I think it's absolutely the scenario you laid out is in play. Like I don't think we're jumping into the top 10. I even think 9 is a stretch. But
I don't know that he gets past Chicago. That
all of these rumors of Daniel Jeremiah, again, talking about the same thing. Dane Brugler was talking about this, that all they're hearing is everybody wants to trade up for an offensive tackle. Well, if they do that, someone has to fall. And it's not crazy that the third of the 3 receivers could be the guy to fall down a little bit. And I know people lean into this comp a lot, but if you have a chance to give Josh Allen a rookie year Devontae Adams, and you have that kind of guy to be able to give him, whew. All right. So I'm going to rain on people's parade. Apparently you guys were both more excited than I was. So I've been on it early on. I know there are other people who have been excited about this. I think like many of these prospects outside the top 3, Anthony talked about the size profile for Worthy. There's, the effort issues with Mitchell. I know that there's the late breakout in the age with Xavier Legette, but from my untrained eye, I see AJ Brown. Like I look and I see
that's 100%. He can be a baby.
225 rocked up, taking a 6-yard slant, 80 yards to the house, past SEC cornerbacks that he's pulling away from while he outweighs them by 40 pounds. I can't not want that. Like I can't not want that on the team. So I think he's in the range that makes sense.
Much more realistic than mine. Yeah,
a very realistic possibility of what's there. I'm not saying he's a perfect prospect. The questions about the age and the late breakout are valid. There are reasons. There are legitimate reasons. Some really good people have done detailed explanations about his switch from quarterback and the coaching change when he first got there and the injury when he first got there. I also think this, matter of fact, anybody named Xavier would intrigue me in this. The new rules with the kickoff returns, putting either Worthy or Legette back there with a head of steam, and you get 3 or 4 extra schemed up touches, basically a game that now you get a little bit extra in this new, whatever this new kickoff rule structure is going to be. I just think there's a possibility that he's, I don't know. Is it ideal that he's 28 when we get to his second contract? No, but if that's our biggest issue, is that after 5 really productive, great years
in a Super Bowl,
we only want to do a 2 or 3 year extension, and we're nervous about a 4-year extension or 5-year extension. Okay, I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'm not going to not take who I think, if it falls this way, who would be the best player on the board at the time because of things like that. If his film checks out, his background checks out, his medicals check out, I want the guy who's the best player on the field right now, and he looked like the best player on the field in several SEC games. I'll take that.
And I want to hear him in press conferences too. I love that voice. But
that boy's Southern. That boy's so Southern. Extra Southern.
He's one of the more interesting ones to me in terms of this is what I can't wait to find out. We've seen all these mocks, we've seen all these projections of I have no idea what the NFL values for Xavier Legette. He could be reasonable in the first round, in that late first round. He could fall into the middle of the second round. I really don't know. And I'm interested to see what the talent evaluators at the NFL level, not draft Twitter, have on him. And because he's probably one of the ones that more have a broader area of where he's been projected.
He could be one of those Goldilocks scenarios of hey, everything fell just right, but all of a sudden somebody offers you a Godfather offer because they want to come up for the 5th-year option for Michael Penix Jr. And then you get Xavier Legette at pick 36 or something like that. Where then you kind of get your cake and eat it too. And now we get that 3rd-round safety, or we get that 3rd-round defensive tackle because we dropped down a little bit. So that's one that could really kind of play out both ways. So Anthony, let's say it does go a different way, and it doesn't have to be this. We already talked about premium picks, so you can go a little bit deeper. Let's say we're talking about the double dip and that you're pairing somebody up. So whether it's directly with Worthy or the other way, if we got a Brian Thomas Jr. and a Odunze, a Legette, and we got the big X, who's a guy on day 3 that you think intrigues you or excites you from a receiver standpoint?
It really comes down to that pairing, like you said. So like, for instance, like if I take Xavier Worthy, I'm really hoping that I get Brenden Rice, which isn't the most ideal X, but given his body type, his frame, I still think there's some upside there. I think he didn't finish well at the Senior Bowl, but he did a lot of good things when it came to working through his releases and some of his stem work. And he was getting open. He just couldn't put complete reps together, which was extremely frustrating for him, but he powered through. So that's like my ideal scenario from a day 3 perspective. And I think he could be there potentially into the 4th round. But what's tricky is with the X's, and this is why I lean going with an X earlier, there's not a lot of them. And so it's scarce like, at that spot.
You get into like the Johnny Wilsons or Cornelius Johnsons that look like it, but don't always play like it.
Yes. And that's what you're hoping for. Like if you get into day 3 and you still need an X, you're hoping maybe some reason Javon Baker is still there.
Literally, I was going to say about Javon Baker was going to be mine.
Yeah, Justin Shorter. You're talking about guys who look the part, but maybe aren't the receiver. You're talking about you get Justin Shorters on day 3.
And that's what's like tricky. Like if any of them go early, you're sitting there on day 3 with more of the fun, dynamic wide receiver guys, which isn't bad, and less of the X guys. And that's just because there's scarcity at that prototypical X type of spot. So if I'm pairing it with Worthy, I'm going to go with Brenden Rice. There's a lot of intriguing options, though, and I think a lot of the guys who I initially liked on day 3, I think are starting to creep up into day 2. Like
Aaron and I are both going to cheat. I have a feeling where there's guys we're going to list and they end up not being day 3 guys.
Because I was going to say, like, my initial like dream day 3 guys were like guys like Malik Washington or Jalen McMillan. And now I think they might be creeping up a little bit into round 3, into that area where we should have had a friggin' comp pick and we don't for whatever reason. So
I still think Bean gets into round 3.
I would love that. That's my dream scenario is similar to what Greg said. You trade out of 28 and you go into the mid 30s and you acquire a pick in the 90s or early 100s. Yeah. Like give me that type of round.
Give me as many top 100 players as we can walk
give me
away
as
with.
Many day 2 gems in terms of picks and quantity as possible.
Yeah.
So for this, I went with more of like somebody who I think is a true day 3 guy. Yeah. I went with Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State.
I've seen you talk about him, and it might be the only guy I've seen talk about him.
He had some flashes at the Senior Bowl, and I always noticed the dudes from the random, no disrespect, but the random colleges like Southeast Missouri State, or like when Jerry Rice was like Mississippi Valley State, and you're like, what school is that? But he flashed at the Senior Bowl. He also had a top 30 visit with the Bills, and I find that very interesting for a guy that is looking like a day 3 guy, for as unpolished as he is, and to have a top 30 visit, because teams don't throw those away. So the fact that he had one, I found that to be very interesting. He's well built. He's athletic. He's got speed. That athleticism shows on tape. It also shows in the drills. He had a tremendous gauntlet run at the combine, soft, strong hands, held that line, very similar to how Keon Coleman performed in terms of holding that line from a technical perspective. Needs to clean up his route running. He does lack precision and deception. He also is currently 24 years old, which isn't the most ideal piece. But then some McDermott pieces. He's a really good blocker, team captain, and also fun pieces, even though I don't love comps. His top 4 athletic profile comps are Jermaine Burton, Jalen Polk, Jonathan Mingo, and Jalen McMillan. So if you can get a dude like that in round 5 or round 6, also pairing it with, from a predictive fashion of him coming in with a top 30 visit for the Bills, that's going to be my day 3 guy. But yeah, I tried not to cheat. I cheated for safety, so I should kind of preface that. But yeah, a lot of the dudes who I really like on day 3, I'm thinking they creep up into the back end of day 2.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't closely follow the Southeast Missouri Redhawks.
Yeah, sorry. I know. I saw the comment that was like, who did he say? And I was like,
I thought this was a fake school.
Yeah.
I thought you were lying.
Anthony. Yeah. No, he literally was talking about Southeast Missouri Redhawks. So Ryan Flournoy is the guy here. A little over 6 foot, 200 pounds, tested really well. And like you said, flashed at the
and a lot of good explosion stuff, the vert, the broad, like his movement. And you see that, you just need to add some polish, and he's got some good size and some fun stuff you can do. But the top 30 visit was really like, once I saw that, I was like, oh, he's like a later day 3 dude. That's an interesting person to bring in for a top 30.
Yeah.
I like it.
Outside of that, I've low-key hated the Bills' top 30 visits at
It's
receiver.
been weird.
They've been
It's
weird.
been
They've
weird.
been
Weird.
all over the place. When
Yeah.
and then they brought in Trey Benson, which I was like,
Yeah.
what is happening?
What are we doing?
Aaron?
Yeah, so I am going to cheat, but before I cheat, if I had to not cheat, I would go on name only and go with Pitt's Bub Means, because that's
It is
a dope. It's a dope.
I thought you were
And he's
going to go
6'2".
by. I thought you were going to have nepotism. I thought you were going to go Luke McCaffrey. I had a penny there. I thought you were going to go McCaffrey.
I want him to work out because I love that bloodline. But yeah, no, I'm gonna go with I am gonna cheat and do what, again, the boards and things that we've been
He's
doing.
the guy. You made a comment about Xavier Legette earlier. This is the guy that has the widest variance of anybody that I've seen. I've seen Javon Baker people go confidently, like 130, and other people like, no, he's going to go 42nd. Like his range is crazy.
Yeah, I had it, Javon Baker, and it was Malik Washington right there. But I do think Anthony's right that that's probably gonna creep up sooner, and you probably have to get into the third round there. But yeah, I've got Javon Baker. I think that he also provides. So like, I would love to see him paired with Khalil Shakir, because I think that like he can be a big slot and you can kick Shakir out and do some stuff out there. And then you could put him as an X and put Shakir on the inside. Like they're just both seem to be chess pieces that I would love to see somebody play with. And especially if you landed Worthy early on and you can have that chess piece, like that gets me all excited and giddy for the type of positionless wide receiver stuff that you can then do with the Bills, and just that type of aggression that he brings. And so, yeah, he's probably not going to be that day 3 guy, but that's going to be my guy for the show.
So I have a couple of different options the same way that if it was my choice and we went with Xavier Legette earlier, I'd be intrigued to maybe mess around. I've seen a lot of different ranges for Jamari Thrash. I'm not sure exactly where he's going to end.
He was one I considered here too on day 3. He's going to go in like round 3 or round 4. There's a chance he could be there at 128, but I feel like he's going to go where the Bills should have a third round pick.
Yeah, sadly. The other one I do get intrigued by, say it is a Xavier Worthy. Like I am kind of intrigued by Johnny Wilson and having like this like 6'7" frame and 230, but like is like really lanky, long arms. Like I do think he would be a day 3 pick. I think he is going to be there, a guy you might be able to get in the 5th round or something. Where there's no downside. Like there's no downside to that, and you might just get yourself like, hey, yeah, he can run some clear out routes. He can, obviously do some of the different pieces, but maybe they have a package that works as a red zone kind of piece where you have a guy that has explosive jumping ability while being 6'7" with. So I'll give you the whole. I might as well bring it up.
We saw Gabe Davis sort of thrive in that tight end 2 role when Knox was out, like a player that could do stuff really like that.
So just, if I'm going to throw a dart, I want to throw a dart at 10-inch hands, 35 3/8 arms on a 6'6" and change frame, who can also jump 37 inches in the air. Like that combination, he legitimately might be able to high point a ball higher than any player in the NFL. Like that's a legitimate case that combination of hand size, arm length, height, and vertical, there might not be a higher maximum apex point of a jump ball of any player in the NFL. That's intriguing. Like that's like, all right, if I want to throw a dart that late, that could be fun at least.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I want to see him play to that size more consistently.
Oh yeah.
But
which is why he's a 5th rounder.
Yes. But when he does, it's beautiful. And again, like he has reach that physics, the laws of physics tell you that other guys
What's
can't
Darren
hit.
Johnson supposed to do against Johnny
He
Wilson?
got nothing. And there's I was watching Jarvis Brownlee for the corner for Louisville, and him and Wilson are getting into it. And when Wilson finally gets pissed off and decides to put Brownlee in the dirt, he does it over and over because of how physically imposing he is. And yeah, that's a really realistic one that I like. I want to circle back real quick to Javon Baker. A lot of people have been coming into my mentions. No, I shouldn't say a lot of people. A very vocal minority have been coming in saying that they don't like his 10% drop rate from 2023. I think if you watch the tape, it speaks to a person who you don't have concerns about with drops. It's concentrated. Yes. He doesn't have bad hands. And those that data point gets talked about a lot because it's low-hanging fruit. I want to talk about some positive ones real quick, or just list them. Javon Baker amongst the 109 wide receivers that had at least 80 targets in 2023. So again, out of 109 wide receivers, including all the big boys, first in yards per target, first in yards per reception, third in first down percentage, third in average depth of target, first in average depth of catch, 17th in EPA per target, and tied for 9th in yards per route run. That is still... for if the Bills don't go receiver in round 1, I'm on still that dream scenario of Javon Baker at 60 in round 2, because you have that gap until 128 and he ticks so many boxes like Aaron talked about.
Yeah. Drop rate's also a lot like sacks, where it can be weird in a season. It doesn't mean anything.
A lot of noise. So let's switch here. Let's go into some of the other positions here. Obviously, wide receiver is going to be the main talking point, so we probably won't go quite as in depth with some of these other spots. Let's start with you, Aaron. Do you want to go defensive line or safety?
Whatever you want.
Let's go defensive tackle. Let's start with defensive tackle. Are there guys early on, some of those names that you hear, are there guys you would be comfortable as a premium pick? And again, premium, our definition for this show was first or second round. Is there a guy that you would like Bills fans to think about as a first or second round pick?
I don't believe the mocks where I see Newton there. I think that a team is going to prioritize interior play too much for him to fall to 28. If he's there, I feel like that's a tough one to turn away. But for me, it's I landed on Kris Jenkins in the second round. I don't know if it's me being a Michigan stan, but I would love to put him and pair him with Ed Oliver here going forward and supplement Daquan Jones a little bit, because it's a long season. And I think that he could be a good player for a long time in this defense. And I think that he hasn't come close to hitting his ceiling. And there's a lot of athleticism in there that you could get out and pair with Ed Oliver. And I'm still a big believer. I love edge rushers and all that stuff, but interior pressure matters the most. And I think that's the number one way to impact a Patrick Mahomes type guy, which is the hurdle we're trying to get over. And so the more bodies you can have in there, the better. And I would feel comfortable walking away with Kris Jenkins in the second.
So I'm gonna cheat a little bit and cede some of my time to the gentleman at Disguise Coverage. I only want the premium player. Like, if Byron Murphy somehow is available, that's just you know, what do you do? You got to take him. I like Jer'Zhan, Johnny Jenkins. I like some of the other guys in this area, but there's the depth of this defensive tackle class is so good that I'm going to wait for my day 3 guys, because there's so many names that are available there, or could be at 60, or if we trade back or move up from 128 or just sit at 128. There are so many guys in that nice. I love the fact that we do have the 2/4 and 3/5. That's a nice little pocket in some of positions like this. And another one we're going to talk about in a bit at safety. There are so many guys in that range that if it's Byron Murphy, I'm on board. I'll take him. Yep. But if it's not, I'd rather go another direction, because I trust the depth of this class. I feel good we can get a really good guy in day 3.
If we're going on day 2, I want Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State. The quickness, the lateral agility, the explosion, the quickness that translates to violence. He's got a nasty swim move that he beats so many dudes with. He drops Joe Alt, the arguably tackle 1 in this tremendous offensive line class. When they played Notre Dame earlier this year, that he drops him just on an instant. He leverages his gaps. He's able to pinball and ricochet inside when he gets doubled or even displaced at times on feed blocks. He got a bunch of one tech reps at Ohio State, which is weird, but if you let him eat in a 3-tech role, especially in a 1-gap penetrating defense like the Bills, I really think he can start to hit that trajectory and that ceiling again. Quickness, explosion, violence, plays like a velociraptor at times on the inside. He's my premium day 2 guy. People are probably going to hate me, and they're not surprised if they've watched all the mocks that I've done. I do like Johnny Newton in round 1 if he's there. I think Murphy is the number 1, but I have a round 1 grade on Newton, and a similar aspect of Hall, just quickness, penetration, explosion on the interior, and you pair him with Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. You now have this nasty 3-man rotation on the inside. Johnny Newton is also probably playing alongside Ed Oliver in known passing down situations.
If you take the combo, let's say Ed even plays 75% of snaps, that means there's 25% needed as a backup 3-tech. And then you take another chunk of the obvious passing downs where Daquan doesn't have to be on the field, you can immediately give a rookie 3-tech 50, 55, 60% of snaps without it's very feasible if the right guy is there to do it.
Yes. I was looking at it and I can't find it in my notes now, but I was checking like the percentage of snaps and usage rates from this past year. Like conservatively, if they took Newton, I think he's seeing at least 45. But to your point, I think you could see 50 to 55 with that right game script. Then you get to let Daquan focus more on rundowns, even though he still is effective as a pass rusher, but you can let him eat on early on rundowns, keep him fresher come playoff time, and just let him be a true all-pro potential game wrecker like he was in 2022. And then the pass rush potential of Newton and Oliver on third downs or known passing situations, I just think is tremendous. Again, explosive, gap penetrator. His hand usage is what really gets me. His hands are quick. They're well placed. They have pop and shock. He's got burst and agility. If you want to watch any game to understand Johnny Newton, and there's several, watch the Wisconsin game where he just destroys Wisconsin rep after rep, and then realize he's playing on a friggin' broken foot that entire game. And he's beating everybody on the interior snap after snap. He's wrecking the quarterback, and he's doing it on a broken foot. And the quickness and the agility, and he's running the arc and going through dudes, just absolute monster on the interior. He's another dream scenario where I think you could trade into the lower mid 30s and maybe still get him, which I would love. But yeah, he's that real premium guy if we're looking round 1, and then Michael Hall Jr. in round 2 if we're going there.
So, Aaron, what's a name that sticks out to you if we wait on defensive tackle and we get one of the guys in that little pocket later?
Oh man, I don't know. Honestly, a guy that I like that keeps falling on boards, and I thought he had a really nice Senior Bowl. McKinnley Jackson was a guy that he just seems to keep falling and falling deeper in these boards as the draft process goes on. And I don't really know why, but I think he would give you a big body that you could fill in here. But honestly, I think if you miss, it's just maybe a DeWayne Carter, McKinnley Jackson type guy, but none of these guys are also like, they're just going to be, in my opinion, rotational guys where I would like to see something more to supplement Daquan now and be able to replace Daquan here going forward in the future. Cause I don't know when that would, like, I think guys like Daquan Jones can play well at a later age than some other positions. I think that old man strength show, we saw that with Linval Joseph, that old man strength is hard to go away. But at some point he's going to hit that time frame window. And so I would like to maybe use a more premium asset to fix this room. So we're not just patching it together every year, but if not, just get a big body in there.
Yeah. I know when we had Daniel Harms on, he was talking about DeWayne Carter, had him really high. I know Gabe Hall is another guy that I've liked. You have that connection with Baylor and Dave Aranda and get that insight on there the same way we did with Terrell Bernard. And that, that's another one that if we see that pick, that you probably have a little insight as to why. So those are some of the names there. And I know producer Kris had put in the chat about Maason Smith. You talked about a guy who at one point, was talked about as a top 5 pick. You're talking about getting an elite talent that had, obviously had the ACL, had some other challenges, but you're talking about a guy that was expected to be like this game wrecking presence. If you can get him later, that's I'm not going to compare him and Johnny Wilson, but again, if I'm taking shots, I want to take a shot where like, hey, if it hits, you have like special traits and special attributes. That's the kind of guy that I would have. Who's one of your late guys at defensive tackle?
It's going to be Carter for me. Initially, I had hoped, initially early in the process, I hoped it was going to be Michael Hall, and I'm like, he's not going to last until day 3. I wanted it to be Maason Smith. I think he's going to go on day 2 now just because of those traits like you mentioned. He's got ridiculous length. Where is it in my note? 35-inch arms, 84 and 5/8 wingspan. And he uses it to like, he'll stack, he'll pop someone, extend, and then all he does is just swing his arm out, and it goes the length of the entire gap, and he just wrangles the running back and brings him in. I do think he's more traits than polish and production right now, but I think someone's going to bet on those traits because of his size, because of the length, what he can do on the interior. I really wanted to say him for this answer, but I think he's going to go more on day 2, so I'm going to go with DeWayne Carter, who, to Aaron's point, I think he is more rotational in terms of his upside. Like, that's what he's going to be. You're still probably looking at Daquan and Ed doing the heavy lifting on the interior, and then DeWayne Carter and Austin Johnson or Williams or whoever, like rotating in kind of in those spots after. He can drive offensive linemen back and penetrate. He's got a really great motor, hustle, and pursuit. He's a 3-time team captain, plays with a good like flat back, and his ability to do that consistently at the Senior Bowl is something that initially intrigued me. His hand usage is fun, leverage and quickness. But yeah, he's more of like a rotational 3-tech, which is fine, but I don't think he offers that upside of potentially Jenkins or Hall or more of the premium guys, which is understood why he would go on day 3.
So at our next spot, we'll go to safety, and I'm so torn. It's really similar comments to what I did at defensive tackle, and it's going to be like Cooper DeJean or nothing. Like if Cooper DeJean's there, I don't know that I want to invest at that position in the first round, but he looks pretty ideal for exactly what we do at safety and like the versatility and athleticism and everything that's there. I genuinely don't think I'd be that excited, but I'd get my head around it. I'd be like, all right, like he's universally graded higher, and that's a great play, a great player, and it's a position that we need. All right, I'll get my head around it. I really hope we don't use one of the first 2 picks on corners, because I'm going to have a hard time picking like which of the 6 guys in the 4th round that I think we could like, because there's so many options there. I feel really confident one of them will be there and we'll be all right. So I guess technically my choice is Cooper DeJean. Aaron, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this one's a weird one for me because I went into this draft process and it was like Nubin and Cam Kinchens were like up there for me, and Cam Kinchens really throughout this process sort of fallen off in terms of that premium type thing. And even Nubin kind of like, I don't love using that premium asset on him. DeJean, I don't know if it's me projecting that I want the Bills to be in on like a real like high-end athlete to play safety, because they could have gone and got Jeremy Chin, right? Like he didn't go for a lot, and that also seemed like, man, if this is that type of move piece player that we want, he's right there, and he did not break the bank. The Bills could have easily been in on him, even though we thought that could be something that they wanted to do. And so I don't know. I think that this is a Sean McDermott wet dream a little bit, an Iowa safety can be a move piece and a guy that you move around. And I do think, you look at some of these guys like a Kyle Hamilton type player that can just be a total game changer in terms of what you can do on defense. But I also see the historical evidence that the Bills are able to do more with less at the defensive backfield than any position. Like if you're going to get more out of less than any group, it's going to be a DB. So do you really need to use a premium spot? And I like a lot of the guys later in this draft in terms of their athletic profile. And again, I think you can get a guy that maybe has some flaws, but as long as they have a pretty good ceiling, the Bills are going to find a way to draw that ceiling out of the player. So I'm probably not using a premium asset, but if I am and I could get my head around it, it would be DeJean.
DeJean is such an enigma for me because he's so athletic. And I said this when I had Dane Brugler on, and then Brugler agreed with me, which kind of validated a lot of my thought process. So I felt really good about myself.
Not a bad person to agree with you.
Yeah, he just nodded and he's like, no, you're spot on. And I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. Because he's so athletic and he's so versatile, but he's got some stiffness and tightness in his hips, which can affect him when he's playing press and when he's playing man. Like there's times where he's getting run by dudes against Purdue, and these aren't like stud receivers in the Big Ten, and he's just getting worked. And then his reaction time is average. And I don't think he could be more physical intense as a tackler. And I don't think he's a overly good tackler. Like I feel like he's kind of wishy-washy. So I don't know where he's got this athletic profile. I don't know where he plays best. I'm worried that he ends up being a jack of all trades and master of none, which can potentially be fun because, okay, outside corner, slot, safety. I don't know where he best projects. I think it's corner, even though the stiffness and the reaction time, because he does have good eyes, especially if you're playing him in zone. You could play him as a cover 2 corner or a cover 3 corner, and his eyes and processing are real good. I just don't know how. I don't love the safety projection for him. So similar to, I would be okay. Like if they took him,
so
he's
it feels
got
like a chin.
Yeah, like
can do a lot of things, but hasn't really proven to do any of it.
Which is also exciting because it's like to the opposite side of the conversation. Sean McDermott has gotten so much blood out of these stones in the secondary that don't have a lot of blood, and Cooper DeJean has tons of blood. So imagine what he could do with a guy like that, similar to the chin conversation. So I wouldn't be disappointed. I wouldn't be over the moon. I'm similar to Aaron where I'm not spending a premium pick. I still think Tyler Nubin is safety 1 and Cam Kinchens is safety 2. Anybody can come fight me if you want. I just don't think they're able to get Cam because I don't want to do it at pick 60. I wouldn't hate it, but I don't want to do it at 60 given how the rest of the roster looks. I really think you need to do it in round 3, and I don't think the Bills have a pick there right now because of the comp pick. I just don't use his 40 time as a knock on his range. Watch the tape. I posted his interception against Louisville where he's a single high post safety and he runs from seam to seam and jumps it and makes a pick on a non-late throw. Dude can play ball and he would fit this defense tremendously, but I'm not spending a premium pick. I have more multiple day 3 options that I really like.
So let's start with some of those. One that kind of fits into our conversation about Malik Washington, Javon Baker, whatever it is. I think our guy, Steve Mathis, has been talking about him for months now.
I hate Demerson.
So Dadrion Taylor-Demerson is a smaller guy with a lot of range. It does sound like his stock is coming up and that he might go a bit earlier. My choice is going to be Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest. Just like you watch his pro day and he like takes his shirt off to do his vertical and he looks like those outfits they give you to dress up as a Marvel superhero, but he just looks like that all the time. Is just ridiculous. And then like puts up a 42-inch vertical.
Yeah.
And it's just a guy that like drops the hammer when he comes down in the box and is not afraid to make big hits, but still has movement. He's not gonna be Micah Hyde back there, but still has some movement skills. I think I won't rattle off other names because you guys are still going, but there's just a lot of guys in that space where I feel like we can still be in really good shape and get a guy that we don't have to rush onto the field because we got Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. But if they're ready to earn reps right off the bat, they can. If not, you let them work their way in. They play special teams and they are able to take a job going forward and be the starter in 2025. I love a lot of these guys in that range, and I think we'll be able to get somebody. Ant, we'll start with you on this one. Who's your day 3 safety target?
So I gave 2. One of them is Mustafa. I've liked him for so long. I'm actually afraid that he creeps up into day 2 now because the safety class is so wonky. Like there's such a varied range. Even the evaluators, like some guys have Jaden Hicks 1. Some have Jaden Hicks as like safety 8. Some have
same thing with Javon Bullard.
Yes. And some people love Cole Bishop. Some people don't. Like it's everywhere. Mustafa,
that's why I feel like we'll get someone at
exactly.
128 or 133. It just could be one of like 8 guys. I don't know.
Yes. And every time, and not that mocks mean anything, but every time I do a mock, Mustafa is there on the PFF ones at like 120 or 140, and I take him every single time because I just think the value is great. He's a legitimate freight train coming from depth and at the tackle point, whether it's coming forward or there's a rep against Notre Dame. Estime breaks the line and gets up the sideline. Mustafa runs him down on the angle, and we all know Audrey Estime is a freight train of a man himself. Goes to stiff arm Mustafa, and Mustafa runs through the stiff arm and spears him through and dumps him on the sideline. And Estime is a huge man. Malik Mustafa, I hate comps. Malik Mustafa is Buda Baker and TJ Ward combined into a player, and it's beautiful to watch. Again, absolute freight train coming forward. Explosive at the tackle point, but also sound in his technique. He's got form plus impact, and he's got better range, Greg, like you said, that he gets credit for. He can function as a single high post safety and in 2 high looks. He's got a great rep against Florida State, covering in the post where he makes a play on the ball. He's smooth and disciplined in coverage. Wake Forest also used him in creative ways. So he'd play as that safety, but they also used him as a spy when they do like odd mirror stuff. They used him as a second level defender, a slot. They'd use him off the edge and have him blitz and drop into like the flats and do all this creative stuff. And when he comes from depth, despite being a big hitter, he takes very good angles and doesn't just run around like a chicken with his head cut off. He's a little late at times in his processing and reaction, but I love him a ton. And Jalen Simpson is my other guy from Auburn. He's got a CB background that allows him to excel in coverage, spot drop, man. He does a lot of match stuff in Auburn. He's on tape driving on Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers and breaking up plays. Only 1 year of safety experience at Auburn because he played corner the years before. But in that 1 year, which was 2023, he had 4 interceptions and 4 pass breakups. He's explosive. He's got a quick trigger and he drives on routes. He closes quickly. The biggest thing is his frame. He's under 180 pounds and his angles to the ball versus the run need work. I think that can be improved with more practice time and having more than 1 year at safety. But my biggest concern is the size. Like, can he push 185 or close to 190? He is fast. He runs in the mid 4.4s. So even if he runs in the higher 4.4s, but can push 185 or 190, I like him a lot just because of what he does in coverage. You can also use him a bit in the slot to do some corner stuff. So Mustafa and Simpson are my ideal guys.
I like it. Aaron, what's a guy that's tickled your fancy?
Well, so I knew you were going to pick Mustafa, just of doing all these with you, and I agree with both of you guys on that. But I'm going to go with a little different. I'm going to say Cole Bishop here for me. I would take a waiver there. Safety's one where I'm happy to roll with the guys they've got, and so I think that you can take a guy again with some flaws if you think he's got a good ceiling and work on those flaws. And it doesn't have to be. This could be one of those situations where it's like a Matt Milano, and it doesn't have to start the season. And as the season progresses and they get better, can come in play. So any of these guys would be fine, and I would trust the Bills to work to get as close to their ceilings as you can.
Mike Edwards is our Ramon Humber. I like it. Okay.
That's
so
nice.
Let's go to interior offensive line. The only choice is Zach Frazier. Like, he's a 4-time state champion wrestler. Like,
That's it. And
like Sean McDermott's already excited to wrestle him. There are obviously other exciting names here, but he checks all the Creed Humphrey boxes that we were checking going into that draft, which means, of course, we're not going to draft him. But yeah, that's mine. Zach Frazier, starting center for West Virginia, is a guy that I think is probably more trade down target than just taking at 28. Probably isn't going to be there at 60. Would be very, very like I had a thought of names you see mocked to the Bills at 28 that you go, but then all of a sudden, like, who would I be excited to see make it to 60? And I had the Osiris Torrance experience of like, well, I don't really want him in the first round, but if he's going to be there in the second round, like, all right, like Zach Frazier's that guy for me. Like, I don't really want him at 28, but like, if we got Zach Frazier at 60, I'd be ecstatic and be really, really excited. So he's my premium guy, just purely because of the wrestling.
I agree. Same boat for me. He just ticks a lot of the boxes from the wrestling background, but his hand usage, just is his physicality. He's more of a leverage guy than he is a people mover, but he can still people move a bit. He can torque and turn guys. He's got a good snatch trap, which is awesome. He's fine climbing, but he's not the most athletic in space. Needs to stay attached better at the second level, similar to Osiris Torrance, ironically, but really smart, good head on his shoulders, good dude, high football IQ. Another candidate that, if they trade back from 28 into like the mid or late 30s, I'd be okay with him being the guy. And then you're also like recouping a 3rd round pick when you do that.
Yeah, that's a candidate big time for the trade back scenario for me. But I'm going to go with not so much of a premium, but into that 2nd round more. And I'm going to go Christian Haynes. I'm a Huskies fan. I'm a UConn guy. So I'm going to go Christian Haynes. I would love to pair that with Osiris Torrance and then figure out center and just have 2 big, mean, nasty dudes that can do some damage. This has been a position that this is probably the one that I've been hardest on Brenden Beane in his tenure with the Buffalo Bills, is how he's attacked the interior offensive line. And it got better last year, but if you could answer it for the next decade, I would be happy to do it.
That's an awesome pick.
So looking at this one's also tough because I think, depending on who you follow, whose boards you look at, whether you like Dane's, that when you look at the Beast and things like that, or you look at some of the mock draft machines that are out there, or the consensus big boards, it's hard to get a feel for who's a day 3 guy or who could be a late day 2. So I think some guys that people like late, like a Zak Zinter or Tanner Bortolini,
Cooper Beebe falls real late. Cooper Beebe,
mocks. Mason McCormick, like those are all guys that if you look some places, those are locked in day 2 guys, like going to be a 3rd round pick, and then other places have them in like the 5th and 6th round. I think PFF has Bortolini ranked like 209th or something. So
yeah,
I have a really hard time with this range. Those are all names of guys that I'd be very interested in. I guess I would probably pick Mason McCormick because I'm intrigued by the athleticism, but I have such a hard time grasping why he's available as late as some people have him versus others. So he'd be my dart throw, but I have a feeling he'll go earlier than a lot of those mocks are making people think.
Yeah, the interior piece is weird. Like, I even just doing mocks like on PFF, I really think Cooper Beebe goes on day 2. He's awesome. Like, I thought he was going to come out last year. I was disappointed that he didn't. I love Cooper Beebe. He'd be a guy I'd be all right with on day 2. But if we're talking like day 3 guys, you mentioned one, Zak Zinter, guard from Michigan, big, physical, smart. We know like how Michigan values their offensive linemen, especially in the run, but overall, like you have to be smart, you have to be physical to play for John Harbaugh. I just like how he can people move. He worked really hard to come back from that leg injury and is already like looking like he's really healthily on the mend, like on the positive aspect of it, which is pretty nuts considering how nasty it was. And I think he's got enough quickness to move and drive. Overall, just like a really good guard aspect with his size, physicality, and does enough in pass protection to just give you confidence there. And then if we're looking at center, I like Beaux Limmer from Arkansas. And he really clicked for me at the Senior Bowl. He's a little over 300 pounds, but watching him anchor versus T'Vondre Sweat in one-on-ones was kind of wild to see. Good flexibility and movement. He's got some guard center flex as well, which is a nice like value piece to him. And he's a guy that I think they're looking at like 4th round, 5th round type of piece, similar to Zinter. So I think either or, depending on if you're looking for more center or more guard or both, would really fit that need on day 3.
Yeah, I would be all in on Zinter. I think that the injury has pushed him down, whether or not that's going to show up in the draft or not, but in boards and in rankings and things like that, I think that injury late in the year pushed him down, and I think he'd be a much higher prospect on people's boards. And it's all the reasons Dan said. Like Michigan, if they do one thing, it is pro-style offense, and it's having solid offensive line play, and you see it with all the running backs that they have had come through there. Like Corum's a fantastic running back. I love him. But you've seen multiple running backs run behind this offensive line year over year. And I think that he would be you could take a late, if he's going to be a day 3 type guy, which I don't think he will be ultimately, but I'm still basing it on the boards that we've played with so far. So he'd be my guy.
Also, shout out to Tim for a great comment here. A lot of people pick Beaux Limmer as well, and him saying he was surprised Limmer's ACLs were still intact after that rep from T'Vondre Sweat at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, so now I saw that comment, like, because he also said he got torched at the Senior Bowl by Sweat. He did on a couple reps, but he also held his own on a couple reps. So it's not like he was just getting worked time and time again. Like, and that's a dude that has him outweighed by like 60 pounds. So the fact that he held his own, again, that it was like a 50-50 battle against, it's like Godzilla versus a human. Like the human should never win a rep, and Limmer was able to do that. Also has some really good reps against Maason Smith on tape.
Nice. All right. So our last position that we had here was edge rusher, and Anthony, I'll let you lead off. Who would be your premium investment at edge rusher?
I want to say Latu. I just don't think he's gonna fall. And especially too, when I had Brugler on, he said that a lot of teams have like cleared him medically and he doesn't see him lasting past pick 25. And my biggest hope was like maybe the medical scare some teams off, but it doesn't really sound like that. I really hope for him, but I just think it's more pie in the sky. He'd be my real premium answer. But aside from him, I'm going to go with Marshawn Nealand, who another top 30 visit for the Bills. He just fits the Bills edge archetype. Compression rusher, looks to go through his man. He's got good arm length and he uses it. Arm extension, heavy hands, huge wingspan. He's also a good processor, works versus the run, processes accurately and quickly versus the run. He's somewhat twitchy. He's not this like dip and turn the corner type of dude. His pass rush plan and moves could use improvement. I see a lot of jokes like if you've seen one Marshawn Nealand rep, you've seen them all, because all he's doing is just going through tackles and going through tackles. Like that's what he does. But every once in a while he'll pull out like a spin or an inside move, but he fits the Bills archetype at that spot. And he does have a good upside. Like if he can put that plan from a pass rush perspective together and have more moves in his arsenal as he develops with his size and his length and his ability to already work against the run with how good of a processor he is, he ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of teams, but just really fits that Bills archetype.
I like it. Aaron?
Chop Robinson. For me, I love the player. I've seen I don't watch a ton of college football during the year, but I watch a lot of Big Ten because I'm a Michigan guy. And it can be dominant at times. He's one of those players that I think has a really big ceiling, and he hasn't even come close to hitting that ceiling. And it's going to take coaching. I think the Bills could coach him up. I think getting with Von Miller to coach him up would be great for a young player like that, where there's still value, whether or not people want to admit it. There's still value in having Von Miller on your team, and him having a full season of being with the guy that runs the pass rush summit would be a fantastic fit for a guy like that. So Robinson would be my guy in this spot.
I like it. I'm in the same space. I think my choice would be Chop Robinson at the top end. I would love it if one of the top three fall to us. I don't think any of the three of them will. I think Latu, Turner, and Verse are all going to be gone in the teens. But we'll see where it goes from there. On day 3, I'll lead us off here. I'm going to cheat. I'm still counting Mo Kamara as the day 3 pick. I don't care. So they can't make me. He's going to go earlier. I know he is. Muhammad Kamara, Colorado State. He looks like Elvis Dumerville, and I want that on my team. And I just want that thick whirling dervish of a guy. I think he'd be a fun guy to mix in. And he's not an archetype similar to Chop Robinson's not but I do think we've seen some steps outside of there. Von Miller, obviously. Leonard Floyd was not an archetype for the Bills. We don't have a lot of 240 some pound, outside linebacker types. They've found different guys to be able to go. I would love to give a guy like Mo Kamara a shot, especially when he could be, from the younger guys, longer term, being that third guy with an AJ Epinesa and Gregory Rousseau, where he can just come in and go crazy balls out on the, pass rush sets. And then be able to just play that 40% of snaps or something like that. I'd be down for that. Anthony, what you got?
I struggle with this all the time
this class drops off crazy.
That's exactly it. Bad. If you don't get one in round 1 or 2, if you're not coming out with one of the big 3 or even Chop or Marshawn Nealand or Chris Braswell, in round 2, it's sketchy on day 3 for a lot of dudes. I went with Nelson Caesar from Houston just because of his arm length and the moves that he operates with. He's got enough burst and speed getting upfield with enough bend to turn the corner. And he does flash some moves. He's got a spin. He's got a cross chop that he mixes with a Euro step. He's good with his angles based on QB drops and tackle sets. And he's got active hands. I think he will struggle with some NFL size and strength, which again is part of the reason why he's a day 3 guy for me. But it's muddy. I struggled with this, typing this into my notes to prepare for this question. And I struggle with it, again, not to use them as the Bible, but mock drafts. If I don't get an edge in one of the first 2 or even sometimes into the 3 rounds, I almost don't want to take any. And I know they need one because it's still I think it's still arguably it's right there with receiver in terms of being a big need. Can Von Miller be a 2? I don't think he's going to be a 1 again. Can he be a 2? Is AJ Epinesa going to jump from a 3 to a 2? Is Casey Toohill your 4 or Kingsley Jonathan? It's not a scary group, but it's worrisome, but the value just isn't there. And where the Bills picks are, it doesn't really align with allowing them to address that position.
And I will say, we've talked about it a little bit. I shared it. The Mike Clay always does his free agent rankings. There's still a lot of guys left. And if you go through and look at Tyus Bowser, Bud Dupree, Marcus Golden, Jerry Hughes, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue, there's a Carl Lawson.
I would take Marcus Golden in a heartbeat.
Emmanuel Ogba. There are guys where if this doesn't work out, maybe a little bit of that Trey White post you in first money could be a filler there, in the same way that, if something doesn't hit at safety, Quandre Diggs and Justin Simmons are still out there. There are spots where some of that Trey White money could be used at. Sure. One of the spots we talked about tonight that won't match up to where it is.
Bring Jerry home. We need him. No, I would, but I'm gonna go with Jalen Harrell out of Michigan. Again, nice. I know I'm a Michigan stan, but I do think that this is one of those guys that didn't produce a ton in college, and I honestly, teams might see him more as a linebacker type edge rusher than necessarily hand in the ground edge rusher guy. But I think that he's got the speed. And again, pair him with a Von Miller and let him develop a little bit for a while. And I think that you could turn him into a situational pass rusher. And that's really the thing to me that's lacking for the Bills, is they have a plenty of guys that can set the edge, guys that can play well-rounded edge play, but they don't have that guy that you can set loose on the third down passing. Besides Von, we're hoping Von Miller gets back to that and maybe even produces to the level Leonard Floyd did for the Bills. But you need a guy that can maybe get a little bendy, have some speed, bend the edge, and just even, I don't need it to be an every down player, just somebody that can be situationally a pass rusher. I think Harold could develop into that, but again, there's a reason he's down in a day 3 pick range.
Xavier Thomas is in that conversation too from Clemson, like undersized, but just pure pass rush juice and flexibility and like some velociraptor to his game as a pass rusher. And yeah, why not take a flyer on that type of dude and see if they can get home on third downs?
Yeah.
So let's go one last one. Any other position you want? It could be a running back. It could be just anything off the board. I will default my choice to producer Kris for Audric Estime. He has been standing for him all draft season long. And I won't lie. I do think there's some logic in the type of back that would pair with James Cook and that has a chance to be available with one of those 4th or 5th round picks. Like I do think an Audric Estime is a name that Bills fans may want to get used to. I think there's a chance he could be there. So my final one for the show here tonight will be Notre Dame running back and freight train, as described by Anthony Prohaska, Audric Estime, and a shout out to our fantastic producer, Kris Kepner, for his guy that he's been standing for this whole draft season.
I like that.
What's your final one, Aaron?
So for me, I'm going to cheat here and do 2 because I have not been taking a lot of takes this draft season, but I've got 3 guys. I'm only going to give you 2 of them because one's probably an undrafted guy that I would take in the 7th round. But
Kenny Logan.
It is Kenny Logan. It is an undrafted guy. Kamani Vidal would be one at the running back position. The contact balance that he shows, the pass blocking ability, these are the things that if you're going to take a late running back, that gets them on the field and that makes them players that are NFL ready and then can get in and be NFL ready. And I think that he could be your short yardage type of guy. He's hard to tackle. He's proven that. I think he just seems pro ready to me, and he's probably going to go a little even earlier than I think. Coleman had him as running back 5 recently. Wow. I saw somebody tag me in that, but I don't know that he's there. But he would be one. And then Dwight McLeodern, cornerback at Arkansas. What I love about him, and Anthony, I respect your opinion on DBs. One of the things I think that is one of the most challenging things for young rookie college defensive backs to come in and do is play off zone coverage. Like everybody can kind of play man nowadays. You have the 7-on-7. There's a lot of that. People love to get up and play press. So it takes a skill in learning, and there's a learning curve into playing some of that soft zone coverage. And no matter what the Bills' transition of this defense is going to be and what the differences and the wrinkles are going to look like, I still think there's going to be true to a Sean McDermott defense where there's a lot of soft zone coverage. I think he can come in, and again, this could be a late round pick. There's no pressure. He could be cornerback 4 and maybe develop into something. But I think that he already has that soft zone coverage ability, makes plays on the ball, nice, long, lanky cornerback. I think you got to take at least one every year. That's my draft philosophy. Is you always got to get a corner in the room. So I would take McLeodern there. He's a draft crush of mine.
Yeah, just a day 3 dude who has traits for like a zone scheme and is confident like in that type of role. It just seems like he would tick that type of box where they take him and just be like, whatever. And then all of a sudden he's CB2 in like 2 or 3 years and you're like, oh, okay.
Yep.
I'm on the corner train. Running back is like fun because they could take like one of 15 running backs and I could or any of us could make the case for him. And I also don't know how the running backs are going to go out. Like Marshawn Lloyd is my one, but I also think Benson's cool. A lot of people like Jonathan Brooks and think apparently like he would be hands down RB1 if he didn't get hurt towards the end of the year. And then you've got,
is that even like a
Blake Corum's RB1,
like a Voorhees situation where it's almost like a redshirt season, but you get the value. Like if Jonathan Brooks is there as one of those 5th round picks, like just take him and stash him on the IR for the season, let him recover from the ACL fully, and then insert him as like, oh, hey, we got a day 2 talent running back here that just we had to wait a year to get him.
That's fair. And like, so I'm like, yeah, when does he come back? Like, where do teams want to take him? Like, it's so muddy.
His ACL, I think, was like November 11th.
Yeah, I was thinking it's end of November, early December. So it gets like muddy with RBs, but you can make the case for a ton. So I don't even want to like go through. I'm going to stick on corner. I don't think it happens in round 1 anymore. I've said it a bunch. Before the Diggs trade, I wouldn't have been surprised if the Bills took a corner at the end of round 1. So if we're just looking at round 1 guys, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry could be a dude at pick 28. Day 2, I think Andrew Phillips from Kentucky, who they had for a top 30 visit, inside outside versatility, nasty coming forward. Like the way he plays the run and tackles needs to kind of get reined in a little bit like Taron Johnson was early in his career, but is just an absolute menace coming forward. And then day 3 guys, Jarvis Brownlee, who I talked about earlier from Louisville, and Kris Abrams-Draine from Missouri. Both offer you some inside-outside versatility where the Bills still could use that. I still think it's we talk about it every year, and Aaron talks about it all the time. It's a real scary situation after Taron Johnson, and slot corner is one of the premier and most difficult positions to play in the NFL because you are on that two-way go, and especially with how Taron plays it, where you have to fit in the run regularly and often as like a second-level defender. It's scary if something happens to Taron. Getting somebody like Abrams-Draine or Jarvis Brownlee, especially Brownlee, who's a little bit bigger and a bit more physical, you get somebody who can maybe be CB4 or CB3 and also be your nickel 2 or your slot 2. It helps with the roster, also from a trajectory standpoint. So those are 4 names I really like at corner.
Love it. Love it. So one final spot here before we sign off. We want to get a special message across from our partners over at William Mattar. So check out this latest commercial from our friends at William Mattar Law Offices.
If you've been in a car crash, you should know this. At William Mattar, there's no fee until we win. That means you don't pay us unless we win your case. If you're hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 444-4444.
So obviously hoping to have more fun guys here to help starting tomorrow night. Any final words for the people, Anthony, before we sign off?
No, exciting time. It's Draftmas Eve. Tomorrow is the NFL draft. It's wild every year how it just creeps up. Like I feel like the Bills season just ended, and then the next thing you know, it's the Senior Bowl, and then it's the Combine, and it's Pro Days, and then we're here already. But it's an awesome time of year. I think the coverage has been great from the brand, and we'll have it for everyone here to bang it here for the next several days. I feel like we're just going to run 24-hour clock and never stop streaming.
Aaron, how about you?
I was going to say, I actually feel the opposite. I feel like the draft season is so long and I'm so tired. But I'm excited because I think the draft coverage has been fantastic. I agree with what Anthony's saying, but I still think that our money spot as a group and as a brand is once we figure out who these guys are that are going to be part of the Bills, is letting you know how it fits and what the fits are going to be and what to expect. So don't sleep on us after the draft when the content isn't as heavy everywhere else. We're going to let you know exactly where these guys are going to fit and how they're going to play in. And then my other last thought is, I think Terry Pegula should take a hint from our friend William Mattar and not pay until we win. And so people shouldn't have to pay their PSLs until they win a Super Bowl. So if the Bills win a Super Bowl, everyone will be happy to pay their PSLs. But until then, Terry needs to pull the PSLs out of here.
I love it. I love it. That would be a true way for William Mattar to be here to help. If he got it, that Terry Pegula couldn't charge people for PSLs. That is the way to do it. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate everybody. The chat was awesome tonight. One last show before it's here, but like Anthony said, it's Draftmas Eve. We have made it. The draft is finally here. On behalf of our fantastic producer, Chris Kepner, Anthony Prohaska, Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.